He just wanted to sleep, but 3 Apache widows wanted to marry him. His boots were dusty and worn, and the small pack on his back felt heavier than ever. He had started the journey months ago, seeking a place where he could escape the noise, the constant demands of people, and the endless responsibilities that had weighed on him. He didn't know if he was looking for a place or just a moment of peace, but all he wanted now was sleep. Just sleep, without interruptions, without anyone asking for anything, without anyone noticing him. The land around him was vast and wild. Rolling hills stretched into the distance, and patches of thick forest provided shadows for the rare travelers who passed this way. The wind whispered through the trees, and birds called to each other, their songs echoing in the quiet morning air. Daniel had always enjoyed nature, but after months of walking alone, the silence felt heavier than he expected. It was not the peaceful kind of silence. It was the kind that reminded him of how alone he was in the world. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Daniel spotted a small wooden cabin perched on a ridge. It looked old, with a slanted roof and walls darkened by weather. The cabin seemed empty, abandoned even, but to Daniel it looked like paradise. Finally, a place where he could rest without interruptions. He quickened his pace, his feet moving faster despite their exhaustion. When he reached the cabin, he leaned against the doorframe, letting out a deep sigh. The smell of pine from the surrounding trees mixed with the faint scent of aged wood. Daniel ran his hands over the rough texture of the walls. This would be his sanctuary for the night, he thought. Inside, the cabin was simple. Dust covered the corners and cobwebs clung to the ceiling, but there was a small fireplace and a wooden bench that could serve as a bed. Daniel dropped his pack and stretched out, feeling the tension in his muscles slowly fade. The sun cast long shadows across the floor, and he felt a small sense of relief. For the first time in months, he was alone, and the only sound he could hear was the gentle creaking of the wooden walls. As he settled in, Daniel thought about why he had come to this remote place. Life back in the towns had been noisy and complicated. People were always asking for favors, always judging, always expecting. Daniel had grown tired of it. He wanted to feel the world without anyone else's presence shaping it. And now here, in this cabin surrounded by the wild, he could finally breathe. He closed his eyes and let the quiet wrap around him. Sleep seemed closer than it had in a long time. Night fell quickly, and the sky turned a deep shade of blue, sprinkled with countless stars. Daniel lay on the wooden bench, listening to the wind whistle through the trees. It was comforting in a way he hadn't expected. The distant howl of a coyote reminded him of the life that thrived outside human settlements, and instead of fear, he felt a strange sense of connection. This was a different world, untouched by the chaos he had left behind. Just as he began to drift into a light sleep, Daniel heard a soft sound outside the cabin. He opened one eye, then the other, and strained to listen. The sound of footsteps, careful, deliberate, moved closer. His heart quickened, and he sat up, grabbing a small stick from the floor to protect himself if needed. But when he looked out the small window, he saw only the shadows of the trees swaying in the moonlight. "It's probably just an animal," he muttered to himself, though he couldn't fully shake the feeling of being watched. Despite his unease, exhaustion took over. Daniel finally laid back down, his eyes closing and his mind drifting between thoughts and dreams. The dream was a strange mix of memories and wishes. A quiet house, the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of people he cared about, and yet always ending with him alone, seeking sleep. It was a bittersweet feeling, this yearning for solitude mixed with the faint ache of loneliness. As the night wore on, Daniel's sleep became deeper. The world outside the cabin seemed to hold its breath. The wind softened, the forest grew still, and even the animals appeared to settle down for the night. Daniel had found the moment he had been searching for, a pause in the constant noise of life. For a few hours he was free. Free to rest, free to dream, free to just be. But little did he know, this quiet, perfect moment was about to change. While Daniel slept, three figures were slowly making their way toward the cabin. They moved with purpose, their eyes fixed on the small structure in the distance. Each of them had traveled far, carrying with them the memories of past lives and the hopes for new beginnings. They were widows from the nearby Apache village, and they had heard of the lone traveler who had entered their land. Each of them believed that he was someone who could bring stability, protection, and perhaps a touch of happiness into their lives. As Daniel continued to sleep, unaware of what was approaching, the night seemed calm and peaceful. But by morning, the quiet cabin that had promised him rest would become the center of a very unexpected story. The journey that had been meant to give him solitude was about to bring him face to face with the lives, hopes, and hearts of three women, each carrying her own story. And so, the night passed quietly, with Daniel dreaming deeply, dreaming of rest, unaware that the morning would bring challenges and surprises unlike anything he had ever experienced. A simple wish to just sleep would soon collide with a reality full of curiosity, culture, and connection, marking the start of an adventure he could never have predicted. The first rays of morning sunlight slipped through the cracks of the old cabin walls, warming the wooden floor. Where Daniel still slept. He shifted slightly, stretching his stiff muscles and savoring the comfort of a few hours of uninterrupted rest. For the first time in what felt like months, he had slept without worry, without the sound of voices demanding attention, without the weight of responsibilities pressing down on him. He thought he had finally found a moment of peace. But peace, as Daniel would soon discover, is often a temporary visitor. A soft, rhythmic sound broke the morning quiet, the gentle crunch of footsteps on dry grass. Daniel stirred, opening one eye, then another, blinking against the soft morning light. At first he thought it was just the wind moving the leaves, but then the sound grew clearer, deliberate, and measured. Someone or something was approaching the cabin. Before Daniel could fully rise, the door creaked open, letting in a sliver of sunlight that lit up the dust particles floating in the air. Three women stepped inside, moving gracefully yet confidently, as if they belonged in the space that Daniel had claimed for himself, even though it had been empty for so long. He froze, unsure if he should call out, greet them, or retreat. His mind raced with questions. Who were they? How had they found him? What did they want? The first woman was tall and serene, her dark hair tied back neatly. Her eyes carried a quiet strength, and there was a soft sadness in her gaze. Daniel noticed the subtle way she observed everything around her, as if measuring it carefully before taking any action. The second woman had an energetic presence, with sharp, alert eyes and a lively expression. Her steps were quick, and she carried herself with a confidence that made it clear she was used to leading or commanding attention. The third woman was quiet, almost shadow-like, moving with careful, deliberate motions. Her soft voice and gentle gestures gave the impression of someone deeply thoughtful, someone who spoke only when her words mattered. Daniel scrambled to his feet, clutching the small stick he had found the night before. Who are you?" he stammered, trying to sound firm though his voice betrayed his nervousness. "We are visitors," the tall woman said calmly, her voice steady yet warm. "We've come to speak with you." Daniel frowned, unsure what to make of this. "Speak with me. About what?" The energetic woman stepped forward, smiling, though Daniel could sense there was seriousness beneath her expression. "We've heard of you, traveler. You have wandered into our lands, and we believe you are a man of strength and character. We wish to know you better and perhaps to ask you something important." Daniel's eyes widened. He had traveled for solitude, for silence, for a place to rest. He had not anticipated visitors, let alone three strangers with intentions that seemed serious. I just wanted to sleep," he muttered, glancing toward the wooden bench. "I don't know if I can talk right now." The tall woman, who Daniel later learned was named Ahioka, tilted her head slightly as if studying him. We mean no harm, but we have come with a purpose. We are widows from a nearby village, and we seek a companion, someone who can bring stability and care. We have chosen you, traveler." Daniel's mouth went dry. He stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the table for support. "You want to marry me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It sounded absurd even to his own ears. He had imagined solitude, silence, perhaps even adventure, but never this. Never three women, each speaking openly about marriage. The second woman, Nijoni, laughed softly, not mockingly, but in a way that carried confidence and amusement. "Yes," she said simply. "We do not take this lightly. We know who you are, or at least the man you seem to be. And we believe that together life could be better for all of us." Daniel shook his head, trying to make sense of it. I don't even know you. I don't even know your names." The third woman, Tayanita, stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "You will know us if you stay. But we are not asking lightly. Our lives have been difficult. We have lost those we loved, and now we seek someone strong, someone honest, someone who can be part of our lives in a meaningful way. You are that person." Daniel's mind reeled. He had wanted rest, a simple night of sleep. Instead, he was confronted with three women, each beautiful, each serious, each carrying a story that he could feel even without knowing their words. He felt trapped in a situation that seemed far beyond anything he had prepared for. I don't know what to say," he admitted, looking from one face to the next. The quiet strength of Ahioka, the fiery energy of Nijoni, and the gentle mystery of Tayanita made it impossible to simply ignore them. He wanted to retreat back to the bench, to cover himself with a blanket and close his eyes again. But something in their gaze made him pause. They were not here to scare him, not here to threaten him. They were here because they believed in him. Ahioka stepped forward, placing a hand gently on his arm. "You do not need to answer now," she said. "We know you have traveled far. You are tired, but we wanted to be honest about our intentions. Tomorrow we can speak more. For now, rest. We will not disturb you." Daniel nodded slowly, still in disbelief. "Rest, right," he muttered, unsure if he could truly relax knowing what he now knew. The women gave a small nod, then stepped back toward the door. The morning sun caught the edges of their hair and clothing, painting them in warm light. Without another word, they left the cabin, disappearing as quietly as they had arrived. Daniel sank back onto the bench, closing his eyes. His mind, however, refused to rest. For hours he lay there, listening to the wind and the distant calls of birds, thinking about the unexpected encounter. Each woman had left a strong impression. Ahioka with her wisdom and quiet courage, Nijoni with her energy and sharp humor, and Tayanita with her gentle spirituality. He realized he had never met people like this, people who carried strength in different forms, yet shared a common purpose. Despite his desire for solitude, a part of Daniel felt drawn to them, even though he could not explain why. There was something in their sincerity that made him reconsider his plans. Perhaps the world was not just a place of chaos and noise. Perhaps there were moments where connection could exist even in the most unexpected ways. He rose from the bench and walked outside, letting the cool morning air wash over him. The forest around him was alive, the wind rustling through the trees, the sunlight glinting on the leaves. Daniel took a deep breath and allowed himself a small smile. Even if he did not fully understand the events that had just occurred, he felt a strange sense of hope. The cabin, once a symbol of solitude and escape, now carried the promise of something different, something unpredictable, something that might change his journey forever. Daniel did not yet know what that change would be, nor how he would respond when the women returned. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of anticipation amidst the exhaustion. As the day passed, Daniel began to move around the cabin, preparing a small fire for warmth and a meal for himself. He found himself thinking about the widows, wondering what their lives had been like, and why they had chosen him. Each thought carried both curiosity and nervousness, and he realized that his simple plan to rest quietly had grown into something far more complicated and far more interesting than he could have imagined. By evening, Daniel sat outside the cabin, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The colors of the sky shifted from bright gold to deep orange, painting the world with a beauty he had almost forgotten. He thought about the women, about his journey, and about the unexpected twists of life. Sleep, which had seemed like the only goal a day ago, now felt different. Perhaps it was not just rest he needed, but understanding, connection, and courage, the very things he had not expected to find in the wild. And so, Daniel prepared himself for the coming days, knowing that his simple wish to just sleep was no longer simple at all. He had stepped into a world where life, tradition, and human connection waited for him, and whether he was ready or not, the journey was only beginning. The morning sun filtered through the cabin's cracks, casting soft golden lines across the wooden floor. Daniel woke with a mixture of anticipation and dread. He had spent the night thinking about the three women who had appeared the day before: Ahioka, Nijoni, and Tayanita, three widows who had come with intentions he could hardly understand. The simple plan he had for solitude had vanished. Now, instead of quiet rest, his days promised a strange combination of curiosity, challenge, and perhaps even amusement. Daniel rose carefully, stretching his sore muscles, and tried to prepare himself for what was to come. He gathered kindling for the fire and arranged a small breakfast, hoping that a sense of normalcy might help him face the women when they arrived. He felt a strange mix of emotions: nervousness, confusion, and even a little excitement. He had traveled far for solitude, yet he was about to meet people who would test every notion he had about isolation and independence. It did not take long for the sound of footsteps to announce the women's return. The door opened gently and Ahioka stepped inside, her calm demeanor unchanged from the day before. Daniel greeted her cautiously. "Good morning. I made some breakfast," he said, pointing to the small fire where water boiled for tea and some bread warmed on the pan. Ahioka nodded approvingly. "Good. You have learned to care for yourself, and that is important," she said softly. Her voice carried a sense of quiet wisdom, as if she had seen many journeys like his and understood the struggles of being alone. Behind her, Nijoni and Tayanita entered. Nijoni's eyes sparkled with mischief. "I hope you have plenty of bread," she said teasingly. "A traveler must be well fed, or he will fall asleep in the middle of the forest." Daniel felt a nervous laugh escape him, surprised by the lightness of her humor. Even in this unusual situation, her energy brought a spark of warmth into the cabin. Tayanita, moving softly, smiled gently. "It is good that you have prepared food. We value care and effort even in small things," she said, her voice calm and reflective. Daniel realized that each woman had a different way of seeing the world, and yet all three shared the same purpose: to engage with him, to draw him into their lives, and perhaps to see if he was willing to stay. The morning passed slowly, filled with awkward conversation, shared meals, and careful observation. The women asked questions, not nosy or demanding but curious, wanting to understand who Daniel was and why he had come to this remote land. In turn, Daniel told bits of his story: the long travels, the search for solitude, and the need to escape the noise of towns and cities. Yet, despite their serious purpose, humor found its way into the interactions. Nijoni, in particular, delighted in playful teasing. She would hide small items Daniel needed, only to hand them to him with a sly smile. She laughed when he jumped or muttered under his breath, and though he tried to remain serious, Daniel found himself chuckling more than he expected. Her energy broke the tension in the cabin, and he realized that life, even in such strange circumstances, could be unexpectedly enjoyable. Ahioka, on the other hand, brought reflection and thoughtfulness. She shared small lessons about patience, strength, and respect. Daniel listened carefully, sometimes in silence, as her words gave him insight into the depth of her character. She had lost a husband, yet her resilience shone through. Daniel began to understand that her interest in him was not merely personal, but rooted in a desire to create stability and meaning in life. Anita offered quiet guidance. She moved gracefully around the cabin, arranging small things, tending the fire, and occasionally speaking in soft, philosophical tones. Daniel could not always understand her words fully, but the feeling they carried, calm, clarity, and thoughtfulness, was undeniable. She encouraged reflection and self-awareness, prompting Daniel to consider more deeply what he truly wanted from this unexpected encounter. As the day went on, small routines formed. The women helped with meals, carried water from a nearby stream, and shared stories of their lives before meeting Daniel. Each tale carried sorrow, strength, and hope. Ahioka spoke of her husband, the loss that had left her life hollow, and the courage it took to continue. Nijoni described her struggles to balance independence with the expectations of her community, her humor often masking the pain she had endured. Anita spoke of spiritual practices, of connecting with the earth, and of finding peace within oneself. Daniel listened to each story with growing respect. He realized that these women were not simply interested in marriage for convenience or comfort. They were survivors, each with a life shaped by loss, resilience, and determination. Their intention to include him in their lives was serious, and he could not take it lightly. However, their interactions were not without challenge. Daniel's attempts to find solitude were repeatedly thwarted. He would sit down to rest, only to find Nijoni asking a question, Ahioka observing his reaction, or Anita offering advice on daily routines. Even small tasks became shared efforts, and Daniel began to see the humor in the situation. What had started as a simple wish for rest had transformed into a lively, complicated household. At first, Daniel resisted, retreating to corners of the cabin, seeking quiet moments. But gradually, he found himself participating more. He prepared meals with their guidance, helped with minor chores, and even joined in their conversations. With each interaction, he grew to understand their personalities better, the fiery spark of Nijoni, the calm wisdom of Ahioka, and the quiet depth of Anita. He began to appreciate the ways in which their presence challenged him, forced him to think, and brought unexpected joy into his days. Evenings were the most surprising. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and red, the cabin came alive with stories, laughter, and gentle debates. Nijoni insisted on teaching Daniel small games and jokes from her culture, while Ahioka spoke of lessons learned in patience and endurance. Anita, as always, guided the discussion with thoughtful questions that encouraged Daniel to reflect on his journey, his desires, and the meaning of connection. Through these interactions, Daniel began to recognize a subtle truth. Life in solitude had been peaceful but also incomplete. There was a richness in shared experience, in learning from others, and in understanding their struggles and strengths. He realized that while he had sought rest and distance, he had also found curiosity, learning, and even companionship. Yet, even with the growing familiarity, Daniel's desire for independence remained. He needed space to think, to process, and to rest. The challenge was to balance his own needs with the women's expectations and desires. The process was neither simple nor easy, but it created moments of humor, insight, and human connection that Daniel had never anticipated. By the end of the day, Daniel sat outside the cabin, watching the stars emerge in the night sky. The wind was gentle, rustling the leaves of nearby trees. He thought about the events of the day, the stories he had heard, and the laughter that had filled the cabin. His wish for sleep was still important, but he understood now that life rarely offered simplicity. Sometimes it brought complexity, challenge, and unexpected joy. As he prepared to sleep that night, Daniel felt a sense of acceptance. He did not know what the coming days would bring, whether the widow's intentions would fully align with his own desires, or whether he would need to make difficult choices. But he had discovered something valuable, that life, even in its chaos and unpredictability, carried opportunities for growth, connection, and understanding. And so, Daniel closed his eyes, not with the hope of complete solitude, but with a cautious curiosity. Tomorrow would bring more conversations, more lessons, and more moments that would challenge and enrich him. The simple wish to sleep had transformed into something more profound, a journey of connection, humor, culture, and the beginnings of understanding a life he had never imagined he would encounter. The next morning, Daniel woke with a heavy sense of anticipation. The previous days had been filled with light conversation, gentle teasing, and small routines that had begun to settle into a rhythm. But today felt different. There was a quiet intensity in the cabin, a feeling that something more serious was about to unfold. As he rose and prepared a small fire for warmth and breakfast, he could hear the soft rustling of the women moving around, each immersed in her own thoughts. When the three widows entered the cabin, their expressions were softer, more reflective. Ahioka, usually calm and composed, seemed to carry a quiet weight. Najoni's energy was slightly subdued, and Tayanita's gentle presence radiated an unusual solemnity. Daniel noticed immediately that something had shifted. There was no teasing today, no light-hearted banter. The atmosphere was different, almost sacred, as though the cabin itself had transformed into a space for stories, emotions, and memories that demanded attention. Ahioka broke the silence first. "Daniel," she began, her voice calm but steady, "we want to show you who we are, not just as widows seeking companionship, but as people who have lived, who have loved, and who have lost." She paused, as if weighing her words carefully. "We have faced hardships that have shaped us, and it is important that you understand this before making any choices about your presence in our lives." Daniel nodded slowly, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He had grown to respect the women for their strength and sincerity, but he realized that he had only seen parts of their lives. Now, he was about to witness the deeper, more personal layers, the moments that had forged their resilience. Ahioka began her story first. She spoke of her husband, a man she had loved deeply. She described their life together, the small joys and daily routines that had made their days full, and the tragedy of his sudden passing. Daniel listened in silence, feeling the weight of her grief as she spoke. Her voice trembled only slightly, but the sorrow beneath it was undeniable. Ahioka spoke not to evoke pity but to share truth, her journey of love, loss, and the strength it took to continue living with purpose. Najoni's story came next. Her tone was different, sharp, lively, yet tinged with pain. She described the challenges of being independent in a world that often undervalued women, the struggle to support herself and her community, and the loneliness that accompanied her freedom. Yet beneath her hardships, there was a spark of defiance, a determination to live life fully despite the obstacles. Daniel could sense her resilience in every word, and he realized that her humor, so evident in the past days, had been a shield against her struggles. Finally, Tayanita spoke. Her voice was soft and melodic, carrying a spiritual depth that made every word seem weighty with meaning. She described her connection to the earth, her beliefs about life and death, and the peace she had found in her own reflection after losing her husband. Tayanita's story was less about external events and more about internal understanding, how she had learned to accept loss, to find purpose, and to see life as a series of moments that required mindfulness and presence. Daniel was captivated by her calm wisdom, feeling that each word was a gentle lesson about resilience, patience, and acceptance. As the stories unfolded, Daniel felt a profound shift within himself. He had come to the cabin seeking rest, simplicity, and solitude, But he had found something far more complex: the lives, experiences, and emotions of three remarkable women. Their strength, honesty, and courage stirred something deep within him, a mixture of respect, empathy, and a newfound understanding of human connection. He realized that he had been naive in thinking that solitude was the ultimate escape. True rest, he began to see, was not just physical, it was emotional and spiritual. It required understanding, reflection, and sometimes the willingness to open oneself to the experiences of others. The widow's presence challenged him, not through force or demand, but through the raw honesty of their lives. Throughout the day, the interactions between Daniel and the women grew deeper. Ahioka taught him patience, showing how careful observation and quiet understanding could reveal truths that were not immediately visible. She encouraged him to listen, not just to words, but to gestures, silences, and the subtle language of emotion. Daniel found himself paying attention in ways he never had before, noticing the small shifts in expression, the tone of voice, and the unspoken messages carried in their movements. Nijoni continued to challenge him in other ways. Her energy, though tempered by reflection, pushed him to engage with life more fully. She encouraged him to participate in daily tasks, to share his own experiences, and to confront the discomfort of vulnerability. Through her humor, he found that pain could coexist with joy, that strength could be playful, and that resilience was not the absence of suffering, but the ability to navigate it with grace and courage. Tayanita, as always, offered gentle guidance. She prompted him to consider his own beliefs, his purpose, and the values he wished to carry forward. Through quiet conversation and reflective exercises, she helped Daniel recognize patterns in his own behavior and thoughts that he had previously ignored. Her wisdom was like a soft light, illuminating corners of his mind and heart that had remained in shadow for too long. By evening, Daniel felt emotionally exhausted but strangely invigorated. He had witnessed grief, courage, resilience, and hope, all woven together in the lives of these women. He had also begun to understand that their intentions were not simply about companionship or marriage. They were about forming a meaningful connection built on trust, respect, and shared understanding. Sitting outside the cabin as the sun sank below the horizon, Daniel reflected on the lessons of the day. He thought about his journey, the solitude he had sought, and the unexpected path that had led him here. He realized that life rarely offered simple solutions or easy escapes. Instead, it presented challenges, opportunities, and connections that demanded engagement, empathy, and courage. As the stars emerged in the night sky, Daniel felt a sense of gratitude. He was grateful for the women's honesty, for their willingness to share their lives with him, and for the unexpected growth that had come from this encounter. He also felt a quiet anticipation, wondering how his relationship with them would evolve, what choices he would need to make, and how he would balance his desire for independence with the deepening connections forming before him. For the first time in his journey, Daniel understood that solitude was not the only path to peace. True rest and fulfillment came from engaging with life fully, embracing both its joys and its sorrows, and learning from the experiences of others. The widows had shown him that strength could take many forms, that humor could coexist with pain, and that human connection was a powerful force, capable of transforming even the most solitary traveler. As he prepared to sleep that night, Daniel felt a profound sense of acceptance. He did not yet know the final shape of his journey, nor the ultimate decisions he would make. But he had discovered something invaluable: the richness of life, the depth of human experience, and the extraordinary resilience of the three women who had chosen to share their stories with him. And so, as the cabin grew quiet under the blanket of night, Daniel closed his eyes, carrying with him the lessons, the emotions, and the connections that would guide him in the days to come. The simple wish to rest had evolved into a deeper journey, one of understanding, empathy, and the beginnings of meaningful connection that promised to change his life forever. The morning air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scents of pine and earth into the cabin. Daniel woke with a sense of quiet determination. The past few days had been filled with discovery, challenge, and growth, and today he knew he would need to make a choice. The three women, Ahioka, Nijoni, and Tayanita, had shared their lives, their pain, and their hopes with him. He had learned to laugh with them, to reflect with them, and to respect their strength. Now he faced the reality that his presence in their lives could no longer be just casual or temporary. As Daniel prepared the fire for breakfast, he felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The cabin, which had once been a sanctuary of solitude, had transformed into a space filled with warmth, connection, and the possibility of change. He thought of the journeys that had brought him here, the long miles, the endless search for quiet, and the longing for a place to rest. He realized that the journey had brought him more than rest. It had brought him understanding, companionship, and the chance to see life from a perspective he had never considered. The women entered the cabin quietly, sensing the importance of the day. Ahioka's calm presence filled the room, her eyes thoughtful and attentive. Nijoni carried her usual energy, but it was tempered with seriousness, a recognition that this was no ordinary morning. Tayanita moved softly, radiating patience and wisdom, as if she had already accepted whatever choice Daniel would make. Daniel took a deep breath and spoke first. "I have spent the past few days learning about you, your lives, and your struggles. I have seen your strength, your courage, and your hearts, and I want you to know that I respect and honor each of you, but I also need to be honest about myself." The women listened attentively, their expressions calm but expectant. They did not interrupt, allowing Daniel the space to speak freely. "I came here seeking solitude," he continued. "I wanted to rest, to escape the noise of the world and to find a moment of peace, but in the process I have found connection, something I did not know I was missing. You have shared your stories, your laughter, and your wisdom with me. You have challenged me, taught me, and helped me grow, and for that I am grateful." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I care for each of you and I respect your intentions. But I must be honest about what I can give. I cannot promise the life you may be expecting. I cannot promise to stay forever or to fulfill every hope. I am a traveler at heart, and my journey may not end here. But I can promise respect, honesty, and the willingness to share what I can if you will accept it." Ahioka, Nijoni, and Tayanita exchanged glances, understanding passing silently between them. Ahioka stepped forward, her voice steady. "Daniel, we do not ask for perfection. We do not expect complete commitment in the way the world often defines it. We have come to you with sincerity, not demand. What you offer, truth, respect, and presence, is more valuable than any promise made lightly." Nijoni smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a mix of humor and understanding. "We know your heart, Daniel, and we know your journey. We do not wish to trap you, but to share life where we can. The choice is yours, and we trust your honesty." Tayanita, with her gentle voice, added, "Life is rarely simple. It is full of choices, connections, and growth. Whatever you decide, we accept and honor it. There is courage in honesty, and that is what we value most." Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He realized that the women's intentions were not selfish or demanding. They were rooted in understanding and respect. He could approach this decision without fear of judgment, without pressure, and with the knowledge that whatever path he chose, it would be met with grace. He spent the morning reflecting on his feelings. He thought about the laughter he had shared with Nijoni, the wisdom he had learned from Ahioka, and the quiet strength he had absorbed from Tayanita. He considered his own desires, his need for independence, his love for travel, and his longing for moments of solitude. And he realized that life, like the forest surrounding the cabin, was vast and unpredictable. Sometimes the best path was not the one of complete control, but the one that allowed for growth, connection, and shared experience. By midday, Daniel had made his choice. He gathered the women in the main room of the cabin, looking each of them in the eyes. "I have made my decision," he said quietly. "I cannot promise a life that is fixed or predictable, but I can stay here for now, sharing days, meals, stories, and experiences. I can offer friendship, respect, and presence, and I hope that is enough." Ahioka nodded, her calm expression softening into a small, warm smile. "That is more than enough, Daniel. We do not ask for perfection, only sincerity, and you have shown it in every word and action." Nijoni laughed softly, a sound that carried relief and joy. "Good. Because I think we could use some laughter in our days, and you seem capable of it, even if you try to hide it." Tayanita smiled gently, her eyes reflecting understanding and peace. "Then let us begin this new chapter together, not as master and servant or husband and wife, but as companions, sharing life's moments with honesty and care." The day passed with a sense of harmony and purpose. Daniel worked alongside the women, helping with small chores, preparing meals, and engaging in conversation that ranged from light-hearted teasing to deep reflection. The cabin, once a place of solitude, had become a space of shared experience, laughter, and learning. Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never anticipated, one that did not require perfection or control, only openness and presence. As evening approached, Daniel and the women sat outside the cabin, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sky was painted with hues of gold, orange, and pink, reflecting the beauty of a day that had begun with difficult choices and ended in understanding. They spoke of hopes, dreams, and the small joys of life, finding connection in stories, observations, and shared silence. Daniel realized that his journey had transformed. He had come seeking sleep, solitude, and simplicity, yet he had found growth, companionship, and understanding. The three women, with their courage, wisdom, and energy, had shown him that life's richness was not in avoidance or isolation, but in the willingness to engage fully, to respect others, and to embrace connection where it was offered. As night fell, Daniel prepared a small fire outside and invited the women to sit with him. The stars appeared one by one, shimmering in the clear sky, and the quiet of the forest surrounded them. Daniel felt a profound sense of peace, not the quiet, empty peace he had originally sought, but a living, breathing peace born of connection, respect, and shared experience. "I never expected this," Daniel said softly, looking at the three women around him. "I thought I just wanted sleep, nothing more. But now I see that life is richer than I imagined. You have all taught me so much, and I am grateful." Ahioka placed a hand gently on his arm. "And we are grateful for your honesty, your presence, and your willingness to learn and grow. That is the greatest gift anyone can offer." Nijoni chuckled softly, nudging him playfully. "And don't forget your sense of humor. That helps too." Tayanita smiled, her eyes reflecting the calm wisdom of one who has seen many journeys. "Together, we will find balance, understanding, and moments of joy. That is what life offers, and we will take it as it comes." Daniel leaned back, feeling the cool night air and the warmth of shared company. The journey he had undertaken, once solitary and focused on rest, had transformed into a story of connection, respect, and discovery. He understood that choices were not always about permanence, but about presence and sincerity. And in that understanding, he found a new kind of peace, one that embraced both solitude and companionship, independence and connection, laughter and reflection. As the fire crackled and the stars shone above, Daniel closed his eyes for the first time in days without worry. Sleep came easily, but it was different now, deeper, richer, and accompanied by the knowledge that life, even when unexpected, could be full of meaning, growth, and shared joy. The three women had entered his life uninvited, yet they had become teachers, companions, and friends, and he welcomed the path that lay ahead with an open heart. The journey, once meant to be a search for simple rest, had become a story of understanding, empathy, and human connection, a story that Daniel would carry with him always. And as the night embraced the cabin and the forest, he knew that whatever came next, he was ready to face it with honesty, respect, and the companionship he had found in three remarkable women.